Good morning, everyone. The time having arrived, I'll welcome you to the Wednesday, January 28th, 2015 Board of Supervisors meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency in the Board of Supervisors chambers. We'll start with a flag salute. Mr. Wheeler, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Pesh. Here. Holmes.
Here.
Nader. Nesbitt. Here. Westland. Trebus.
Yes.
Wheeler.
Here.
All right, thank you. I'll now ask for approval of the minutes of the December 3rd, 2014 meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the December 3rd, 2014 meeting. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. Mr. Wheeler abstained. Agenda review. Is there anything on the agenda that anyone has an issue with or would like to? Hearing none, we will move on to public comment. Now is the time for anyone in the public who has anything to say that's not related to an agenda item. Please come forward and state your name and tell us what you're concerned about. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and move to the consent calendar. Any issues on the consent calendar that would need to be pulled for discussion? Seeing none, anyone in the audience have a consent item that needs to be pulled for discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for approval of the consent calendar. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? We will now adjourn as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and convene as a Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. The first item on our agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any items on this calendar that need to be pulled for discussion? Well, seeing none, anyone in the audience wish to pull anything? Seeing none, I'll ask for approval for consent calendar. Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We will now convene as the Placer County, we will adjourn as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency and convene as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. We'll move to item H, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Project Funding Recommendations.
Good morning, Chair Holmes, members of the board. I apologize, I have a little raspy voice this morning, but we're asking for approval of projects for the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, or CMAQ program. And this is a federal program that supports two important PCTPA goals. That's improving air quality and reducing traffic congestion. In August of last year, the board approved guidelines that set aside up to 25% of discretionary funding for regional air quality programs. And then the remaining funding is distributed to our local agencies based on population. And the city of Colfax receives a minimum of $100,000. For these years, for 2017 through 2019, the CMAQ funding is close or just over $14 million. A call for projects was released in September of 2014 with applications due in December. And attachment 1 actually includes a list of the projects we received. All of the projects are deemed eligible under CMAQ guidelines. I do want to make one note. Under the discretionary funding, there are two regional air quality programs, the CCAT and the Spare the Air programs, and those are going to sunset in 2018. So we've set aside approximately $230,000 for future regional air quality programs yet to be determined. The TAC has reviewed this list and recommends board approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If I might add a couple of comments on those regional air quality programs, one of the key things for those is they're part of the state implementation plan, which has certain measures that you have to undertake for air quality conformity. And basically our participation in that is important to make air quality conformity so we can do all the other projects that we want to do in the region. So I wanted to point out that connection on the importance of setting aside those money for the future, because we do expect that the state implementation plan will be updated and these kinds of measures will be part of the updated plan.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board members? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to ask for approval. Moved and seconded to approve items 1 and 2 regarding the congestion mitigation and air quality project funding recommendation. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll now move to item I, Federal Legislative Program for 2015.
Yes, this is my item. Good morning, Acting Chair Holmes and members of the board. I'd like to send out a message to our chair, Diana Russlin, who is home sick today, for a speedy recovery. And in terms of the federal legislative program, we bring this to you every January to guide staff and board members in terms of advocating for, on the federal level, for our transportation program. Bottom line, not a whole lot has changed in the last year, so the legislative program that's before you is almost exactly what you adopted last year. The only change is that there has been another program that has been introduced called the Federal, wait a minute, let me find it, National Freight Initiative, that may generate some funds. That is now being considered in Congress under H.R. 5101, might bring up to $1.9 billion annually being funded by a surcharge on imports. But past that, the program is essentially the same. Now, the challenge that we're up against is that MAP 21, which is the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, because all federal transportation bills have acronyms, the current one actually expired last year and is on continuing resolutions. The current one will expire in May. If that is left as it sits and does expire, that means that federal dollars would be cut off. Like the congestion mitigation and air quality funds that you just approved, those would go away if we have no federal transportation bill. Even as it is, unless some funds are added to the federal bill, it does not balance, and it has not balanced for years. And what's happened is, over the course of time, they have transferred money from the general fund to cover the promises that are made in the transportation bill. So in terms of your legislative program, it includes things like stabilizing the funding and making sure that we get a longer-term bill, and as well as increasing local control of those funds and targeting those projects that are most important to the local entities, not necessarily one-size-fits-all on a national basis, as well as streamlining approvals. We all know how challenging the federal approval process is, and anytime we can streamline that, it means more money on the ground and less money in administration. There are a couple of discretionary programs that are on the books. At this point, the amount of money in them is negligible. For example, the national projects of national and regional significance, which was the source of the funds for the I-80 bottleneck project, that those savings are now being used for the 8065 interchange. They were also used on the 80 Eureka Road interchange. That was the source of those funds. At this point, there is $0 in that program, but you never know. And so we would want to advocate for funding, if it becomes available, for 2 projects, and that is the Placer Parkway. We would ask for $25 million, and for the I-80-65 interchange, $4 million. And the reason for the $4 million is, as you recall, a couple of months ago, we are working with Caltrans on a first phase of the 80-65 interchange, phase 1A, that would widen the viaduct. Our share of that, excuse me, is right around $12 million in the current estimate, and we have about $8 million, a little less than that, from the savings from that same federal earmark. So that's the difference between the two, and it would be very timely if some wonderful things happened and we were able to get some federal money. So you got to ask. And also we would include as our federal rail priority, should funds be available through any of the federal rail discretionary pots, to go to the third track project between Sacramento and Roseville to bring more trains on the Capital Corridor service here to Placer County. Then finally, as we usually do as part of our advocacy program, if some of the jurisdictions have projects that they're advocating for, that we would support those transportation projects. And the ones that have been brought forward to us are the Dry Creek Greenway and the Andorra Undercrossing, both City of Roseville projects. So, and then finally, staff is asking for the board's authorization to advocate for the legislative program back in Washington. In conferring with our chair, Russlin, normally the board sends our board chair back to Washington as well as myself. She had been planning to attend the cap-to-cap trip in April this year, and so what the staff would recommend is that we would split the cost with the city of Rockland to defray that cost for that advocacy. And then I would also essentially meet her in Washington, not go on part of the cap-to-cap trip, but meet her there and do the advocacy those same dates. I'm told by our federal advocate, Sandy Esposito, that the timing is really good for transportation in April. Sometimes the cap-to-cap trip hasn't really worked out in terms of the federal legislative schedule, but this time it really does because of the expiration in May. So staff would recommend that the board authorize that travel. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from board members?
Just real quick, and you already kind of clarified it, that maybe the timing's better this year, because it seemed like last year it was like cap to cap was a little late, and we kind of said maybe the dollar's better spent to go a little early, late February or something like that, when there's not, 16 panel person in the room and you get 30 seconds to speak. So, but you've evaluated it and think it's a much better time this year, and with this split cost, that you feel like that's the proper thing to do.
Yeah, yes. Time and money
So-
really kind of guides that recommendation.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Any other comments? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience wishes to address this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for action. We have a motion.
Yeah, move forward with federal legislative program for 2015. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the federal legislative program for 2015 and direct staff and federal advocates to represent those positions, including travel to Washington, D.C. in April. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. We will move to item J, Transportation Funding Strategy Report, Status Report.
Yes, thank you. I will be introducing this item, and as the board has been well aware, we've been working for many years on trying to bridge the gap between our transportation needs and the funding that we have available, and have been working with the consultant team of Jeff Flint from FSB Core Strategies and Bill Halden from Halden Public Relations under a contract approved by your board back in December of 2013. And we've been very busy in terms of moving that forward. And what I would like to do, well, first of all, Shown in attachment 1 of your agenda, starting on page 43, is a report talking about what's been accomplished this year, or this past year, in 2014, under that contract, and what we have yet to do in 2015. And so to summarize that, I'd like to introduce Jeff Flint of FSB Core Strategies, who has been leading this effort.
Good morning, Mr. Flint.
Good morning. Well, as your executive director mentioned, we have a report in your packets. We prepared that sort of concurrent with the end of the year and the start of the new year to check and see where we had what we had accomplished against what we set out to, and what we saw going ahead, so that we could. I don't know that there's any action for you to sort of affirm your commitment to the program, but we certainly wanted to report into you. And end of years and start of new years is always a good time to do that. So the primary tasks in 2014 were really, first of all, to sort of start to take this out publicly with opinion leaders, both private sector and public sector opinion leaders, and just test the sort of proof of concept. Do we think it's viable to ultimately ask the voters of Placer County for additional funding to fund needed transportation infrastructure projects? So we set out on a series of, probably close to 50 or more meetings. Lost track.
It's closer to 80.
Closer to 80. There you go. I know our initial list was about 50, but we grew it as we met with people and they said, you also need to talk to so-and-so. And so we did, I'm corrected, close to 80 initial meetings, again, both across public and private sector, and sort of said, we have needs. We don't have money. What should we do about it? Talk out what projects might be in there, how we might approach it, the viability of a transportation sales tax, which, as you all know, is the primary means by which local transportation agencies address this. And happy to report that the feedback was very positive. Obviously, I don't think there's anybody in Placer County or anybody in the United States that likes new taxes, but the reception we got was transportation infrastructure is important to this county. We don't have a local source of funds, and we need one, and got a lot of encouragement to continue forward. And that, again, really crossed both the private and the public sector. So we thought we pretty much accomplished everything we set out to in terms of that first tier of stakeholder outreach in 2014 to test the proof of concept and get the sort of buy-in to continue the process. Our other really probably most important deliverable was to start to define our messaging, do an updated round of opinion research, because all of the work that's previously been done has been very conceptual. And in particular in a county like this, the concept of more taxes for even a generic spending purpose of transportation is not going to get a great deal of support. But when you start to refine it as a specific tax with safeguards and with specific projects funded by it, history has shown that starts to drive up support. So as we developed the transportation plan and took some of the feedback from the stakeholders, we took out to the public in the form of focus groups and a survey. You all saw a presentation on that last year. But again, the results showed, as expected, that when we started to make this much more real and less conceptual, the support among voters increased dramatically from the high 30s to the low to mid 60s, and gave us an indication, again, that we are on the right path, knowing obviously we need to ultimately get to 67%. But we feel like as we make this more real and put a lot more meat on the bones, the voters in Placer County are up to it. And again, another indication that we're on the right path and that we should continue forward. We have the creation of the transportation plan and the ordinance, which is ultimately what would appear before the voters if you choose to do that, is really effectively we're creating the product. We know from the earlier polling, as I mentioned, that people are not going to generically vote to tax themselves with a vague promise from a government agency that we promise to spend it on things you care about. They want to know which roads, which freeways, which interchanges, which rail systems and transit systems. And they want it very specifically. So we have started to, and that's really an ongoing process as we continue to talk to stakeholders and the voters at large and continue to do more public outreach. That will evolve, but we've got, and again, you've all heard the project list, but it's we've got the past the skeleton but not fully developed transportation plan and ordinance in process now. We've really started to refine that, and over the course of this year, we'll continue to do that. And then last, two things that I think we really accomplished last year is we started into the process of sort of the next circle of outreach. So we've talked to the insiders and the opinion leaders and got sort of the qualified thumbs up on that. And so we've started to now, the next circle of influence and outreach is people that join groups and belong and go to activities. So people that are in service clubs, people that are in chambers of commerce, people that are in leading industry groups, and sit down with them in a larger setting, in a more public setting, and walk through the presentation and the process and see how folks react to that. And so again, your executive director and a lot of times with the support of you all in terms of helping schedule events has been out and speaking to different community groups, and even some of the historically more rascally ones have been pretty open and receptive again to the concept, because I think sometimes Placer County gets the knock of being this reflexively conservative, anti-tax, anti-government county. And in fact, I think what we're finding, and we found in other counties like this, is that it's not reflexive, it's just more thoughtful. Maybe other areas of the state are a little bit more willing to say, sure, tax us and spend it on good things. In a county that's a little bit more conservative like that, it's, they want more details, but they're not against it. They just are a little bit more skeptical, which makes the burden higher for us, and we're working to meet that burden. And again, as the executive director is finding out and making those presentations, not getting opposition, getting good questions and good feedback and things that we continued then to put out there and refine our messaging and refine our strategy. So I think, we look back at the goals we set ourselves in 2014 at the end of 2013 when you first all approved this contract. Largely we met everything we intended to do. And so then obviously we look at, as this process moves forward, what's on our agenda for 2015 as we move towards a potential decision whether or not to place this on the ballot in 2016. We do have some people left over on the stakeholder list. Most of those are people that got suggested in the first round, and somebody said, you need to talk to so-and-so, and so we've added them in the list, and we're in the process of scheduling those. The meeting list to more public presentations, that's accelerating quickly. I think we got from doing 2 or 3 of those to now we're almost at the point where it's 2 or 3 a week. And apologize, or 2 or 3 tomorrow. Exactly. We have a presentation here in Auburn tomorrow morning, and then a lunchtime presentation in Rockland. So we are definitely taking more of her time and appreciate that, but obviously it's needed. And then probably in the second half of this year, that circle of outreach broadens to the next circle, which is larger community-based organizations that have larger membership groups but aren't necessarily focused just on public policy issues and good government issues, but have something about their affiliation or association that will make this relevant to them when we go and tell it to them. So that would be what would be an example of that? That might be a homeowners association or a youth sports organization or some other larger community-based group that has members in the hundreds or thousands rather than in the tens or dozens, but they don't think about public policy every day. But when you tell them why this matters to them, they might hopefully have an aha moment. Yes, that makes sense. We need to get involved in that. So you all know I'm involved in the Placer United Soccer Club, and I relate that to that group of the parents, working parents, or even stay-at-home parents that are shuttling multiple kids that need to rely on transportation infrastructure to get one kid to soccer practice and the next kid to dance lessons and pick up this kid at school and get the grocery shopping in between that. And that doesn't work if you're stuck in roads and freeways. So that's sort of the next circle, and that's probably a second half of the year when we start to broaden to that group. One of the big jobs in front of us right now, and some of you are participating in this, is really focusing the private sector on the importance of this and the future economic growth of the county. And so we had a really good meeting that was convened by a broad representation of the different industries and economic sectors of the county a couple weeks ago now, hosted by the North State BIA, where we we laid out what this process looks like over the next year and a half, and looking for private sector buy-in that this is going to be a public-private partnership if we're going to move this forward ultimately to the ballot. We need to know that the private sector considers this to be something that is important to them, and the feedback was really positive. It was a very realistic assessment of what it would take to make this happen. And again, a lot of you were at that, so I don't need to tell you the reaction, but it was good. And we've had follow-up meetings since, and we're sort of refining the plan. But I would say at this point right now, we have pretty strong private sector buy-in into the importance of this as a public policy issue for the county. We'll be updating polling over the course of the year, and we're in conversations about when the right time to do that would be. We have benchmarks that we set down with the polling that we did last summer, and we'll test ourselves against those. But part of the polling going forward here is also now to refine different elements of the plan. So we know that voters like a balanced transportation plan. They don't believe it should all go into transit, or should all go into highways, or should all go into roads. They view their transportation needs comprehensively, and so they need to know that there's something in there for everything. But how we define the transit plan, with more specificity, whether particular localized projects, at least in that region, really are drivers of support and things that people are interested in investing in. Those are the kinds of things that you'll start to see more of in future rounds of polling. So the major projects, 8065, 65 widening, Placer Parkway, Highway 49, road rehab, those will always be tested. But we'll also start to test some localized projects and more specific things and see how they impact support or opposition. And then finally, as we talk to some of these bigger community groups and grassroots groups, part of what we'll be asking them to do is for them to make it part of their message as they're communicating with their members. And so it would be if you get a little league to say, we agree this is important to us, and say, well, do you guys have an e-newsletter that you send out to all of your members with when tryouts are going to be and when they need to sign up? Can you put a little blurb on there with a link to our website that talks about the coming conversation about the need to invest in transportation? So we'll be looking to do all of that over the course of the next year. I expect, I'll be back to report to you on occasion over the course of this year, but really wanted to just, again, take this opportunity, your first meeting of the year, to let you know what we accomplish, what we see going forward, and be available to answer any questions you have. And obviously also thank you all for all you've done so far to move this process forward. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from board members?
Yes.
Mr. Pesh.
I think I have two, but let's start off with number one and see
All right.
how that goes. You continually repeated that things looking good, but
Right.
for my benefit, perhaps others, but especially mine, what's a red flag that you might see in 2015 that you would need to bring to us, or that we would be needing to watch for, that all of a sudden says, flashing light, we better stop or reevaluate?
Sure. I mean, ideally, we would like to see, first and foremost, the polling question of a simulated ballot test to continue to go up. And we know, as I mentioned, it went from 39 to 61, 62, 63 range, depending on how we ask it, in this last round of polling. As we refine the project list and figure out exactly how to word that so that engenders the most support, and we get out and talk to more people and start to create a little bit of a grassroots buzz around this, we'd like to see that number continue to go up. Ultimately, when decision time arrives sometime in, maybe late spring of 2016, we would like that number to be consistently polling at or above that 67% level. So no panic that we're at, low 60s right now, but if by the end of 2015, if we've done broader outreach and maybe with some private sector assistance, a little broader advertising of this to get our story out there, I certainly wouldn't want to be here a year from now and tell you we're still at 61%, but everything's looking great. That would be rosy for me to do that, and you should be skeptical if I tell you we haven't made any progress in the last year, but everything is great.
If I may continue, I appreciate that, and that's, I guess, pretty obvious.
Yes.
Thank you for that answer. The other one, and I have been involved in a meeting down here, and we talked about my favorite subject, which is small rural communities that need asphalt improvement. In your polling, has that come up very often? Is that developing as a talking point or a selling point, or is it just small communities aren't resonating? Because I would like them to resonate some.
No, just no. I think you'll be happy to hear that it is. One of the most popular elements of the transportation plan is road maintenance and rehabilitation, and that is strongest in the rural communities because, no disrespect, but Colfax itself is not big enough to register in a statistically valid way. When we're testing 800 people in the county, there might be one or two from Colfax that get the call, but we do know when we cross-tab the data by supervisorial district and also just generally the areas outside of the incorporated cities and towns in the community, that is in fact the strongest element of the plan, because they may not have the funding to deal with their road maintenance as well as at least Lincoln and Roseville and Rockland are, and rural roads are just a more important part of their transportation network. So they see that as more real to their needs than widening the 65. And so, yeah, definitely, we sort of used the 5th Supervisorial District as a proxy for that, and and the local roads and maintenance and county roads and that register really off the charts for there. And it's probably the area that we have the most area for growth is making sure that folks in that part of the county and the more rural parts of the county understand that there is something in there for them, because the versions of the transportation plan that Celia has been working on, have a healthy chunk of money for those communities, but it's not one headline project. It's a lot of money invested over 30 years to bring those roads up to acceptable levels, and we need to drill down to figure out how to communicate that.
Great, thanks a lot. Very
Thanks,
helpful.
Tony.
Sure.
Director,
Thank you. One of the things I was chatting with somebody a while back and about the transportation tax after it came in the newspaper, and they said, "Well, it's a countywide tax, so how much will Auburn really get?" So I mean, there will be a lot of people that are going to go, "Well, I'm going to give 4% or 3%. How are we going to deal with that argument?"
Well, I mean, what we've seen clearly is everybody wants to know what's in it for me.
Right.
And there, as we're starting to work towards fashioning an expenditure plan, what would the money be spent on? There would be a large chunk of the funds that would be distributed to the jurisdictions through a formula yet to be worked out. I've got ideas on how to do that. That would be the discretion of that jurisdiction to know which potholes are most important, what local projects need match money, those kinds of things obviously have to be spent on transportation, so there would be that. But also, if you're an Auburn resident, it's not like you never leave the city limits.
Correct.
And
I know that.
Yeah. And so there is a general benefit of, say, road rehabilitation all over the county or improvements to I-80 through the county. So there's a balance of that. And one of the tricky things about putting together an expenditure plan is to balance all of that there is enough to motivate people to support it, but not so much in any one area that only people from that area support it and everybody else feels like there's nothing in it for them. So that's the tricky balance part of that. That polling also helps guide.
Right. So, and just kind of following up on Tony's comments, is just if we're that close, if we end up, within 1 or 2%, that indifference in the rural areas could make a big difference. So
That's very true.
It's just something to.
You could, and we can get you copies of it. You need to see it again, but the data that we have from last summer, you could argue that if we had been on the ballot even in November of 2014 last year for a Joint Powers Authority transportation sales tax for Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville, that it would have passed, even last year. Mm-hmm. Now, the state doesn't allow us to do that, and so, and Celia's mission is to take care of the county's needs, not Lincoln and Rockland and Roseville's needs. So, we're moving forward with a countywide transportation sales tax. But
As I always say, we love all of our
we do,
jurisdictions equally.
and there will be a time where, probably sometime this year, where we're having individual meetings with different jurisdictions, and you all represent those to talk about, this is where we are right now on a transportation expenditure plan, and get your feedback. And I know the formulas that your executive director is working on try to balance population versus road miles versus need in a way that will be acceptable and sellable to everyone. And it's a difficult balance, but you have one of the smartest persons available on it, and it's looking good to me right now. And that's not just because she's our client, it's because it's true. I've gone to statewide transportation conferences with her, and the respect that she has, and with other agencies that are a lot bigger and have a lot more money, but they say, if we could figure out how to do it as well as you did, maybe we wouldn't need this much money. Anyway, enough on that. But it's true, and so it's a balancing act. But we think we've got at least the beginnings of a good solution on that. Hopefully, you'll be happy with it.
Director Trebus, you have a question?
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
Never better. Thank you.
Good.
And I do appreciate your attending our North Lake Tahoe summit last fall, and I think it was very enlightening to a lot of us to broaden the viewpoint of transportation needs beyond my block.
Sure.
And I realize that when we're looking at any of the transportation infrastructure types of planning, that the main concern is our daily needs for our workers and residents, and the routines that they go through to try to make transportation and movement just real efficient. The one thing I'd like to keep, and I think I've mentioned this before, but keep being considered, is that within all of Placer County, not just Eastern Placer County, we are continuing to have a real growth of visitors. Be that through the wine country, festivals, the various farmers markets activities, as well as seasonal and off-seasonal things that happen.
Absolutely.
And while the basin of Lake Tahoe isn't in the PCTPA vision or realm, it is within Placer counties. And I would like to just keep that as a thought in looking at various proposals that we are thinking about this real growth we're having throughout the county in attracting visitors. And recently, even though although we come into Placer County and PCTPA's territory, we've had a real change in the amount of flights that we're encouraging to come into Reno, so that people do not get a car to come up to Lake Tahoe, but they got to come through Placer County and
Right.
get here. So we're working on needing the need for additional shuttles. The same thing's happening in some of this part, as you know. So just to keep that word visitor.
Definitely. One of we met with Placer Valley Tourism as part of our outreach, and talked with, and I think transportation infrastructure has a big part of the tourism marketing. They're big in, as you know, PVT on sports tourism. And there's a couple of proposed, major sports complexes in various stages of development in the county, one in West Roseville and one in Lincoln along the 65 Lincoln bypass, that are both really ultimately will be activated by investments in transportation infrastructure. The project in Lincoln wouldn't be happening if the bypass didn't get built, and Placer Parkway will be a big part of making the West Roseville complex successful. We're happy to come up and talk with your group there. When we had the private sector group then meeting the week before last, there were representatives of the ski resorts that came down and attended the meeting, and it was great to have them there. So completely understand and agree.
Thank you. Now there's one, I have a light on it, I guess.
Nope, sorry.
Okay.
I have a question. As we move forward in this process, how are you going to address perhaps competing local bond issues or sales tax measures?
That is probably two ways to answer that, but the fairest way to answer it is probably that will be the subject of some near-term additional polling, depending on the nature of that polling, we may hope that some interest in the private sector take that on, because it probably, some of that may go outside of the jurisdiction what's appropriate for the for taxpayer finance polling to look at. But we need to look at it, and there's a couple of ways that a potential school bonds or local tax measures versus a countywide transportation and sales tax could interact with each other, and we need to know the answer to that so we can make some informed decisions. If a couple of you have heard me give a longer version, I'll try to give a short version of this comment, but basically if you look at the Prop 1 and Prop 2 campaigns on the ballot in November of 2014 last year, those were very high-minded, not a lot of details. The governor was on TV and said, California is on its way back, but we got to invest in our water, and we got to save some money for a rainy day, so vote yes on 1 or 2, and please don't ask any questions about it. I mean, effectively, that's what those TV commercials said. And I think in Placer County, if voters are in a really good mood and the economy is just completely buzzing and you have near full employment and people are feeling good about investing in some long-standing infrastructure needs, it's possible that you could have a big school bond and a transportation sales tax measure on the ballot together, and you could have leaders in the county and mailers and TV commercials saying, the economy's recovered and it's time to reinvest in our community, so vote yes on Measure A and Measure B, because it'll fix our schools and fix our roads, and that's all you need to know. And if we're in really happy times, it's conceivable that could be the case. It's also obviously conceivable at the other extreme and saying, you guys are throwing all of these tax measures at me and I'm going to vote no on all of them. And probably reality is somewhere between those two. But that's too big of a question to anybody to trust their gut on, which means we're going to need to do some research and try to figure out how they interact, and if there's a way to make them compatible, and if there's not, is there some leadership in the county that can sort of let people know that we need to do these one at a time, and we need to have a structure and a turn for that, and we'll see. Those decisions get made above my pay grade. So.
Mr. Wheeler, did you have
I do have a couple of questions, and being a new guy, I apologize to the rest of the board and to you if these are redundant questions that you've answered in the past. You've talked about the polling numbers have improved from the 30s up into the 60s. So my question is, what's the methodology that you're using on the polling? Are you saying, are these projects that you're interested in, and then it comes to the caveat of how much you're willing to pay for it? Are you to that point in these polling? And I don't expect a big detailed report, but just kind of give me a thumbnail sketch of what that
It is, and we can, since you're a new board member, we can get you a copy of the reports from the focus groups and the polling from last year. But effectively, I would say the vast majority of the improvement from 39 to low 60s was because we moved from asking the generic question, are you willing to pay more taxes to fund transportation infrastructure, to are you willing to pay this very specific tax if it will build these very specific projects? And we worded that question under the guidelines that state law and legal limits have on how you can ask them. So there's a 75 word limit on the ballot question, and we've observed, as well as I've personally been involved with a number of these, to the point where I know how they tend to get worded on the ballot. So I can't repeat it verbatim from here, but it was sort of, in order to fix the 80-65 interchange, widen 65, build the Placer Parkway, make improvements in, roads and road maintenance and rehab in every community in Placer County, are you willing to vote for a half-cent sales tax for 30 years with taxpayer safeguards? So when you ask the question, roughly like that, that's when you start to get people from the generic, do I trust the government with more of my tax money question, which tested in the 39% range, to now you're telling me very specifically how much the tax is and what I'm going to get for it, and that's what got up to the low 60s. I think there probably is, in the year and a half gap between the polling, there are also probably some increases driven by the fact that the economy has gotten a little bit stronger. Whenever the economy is stronger, people are a little bit more willing to consider that. And also, as the economy has gotten a little bit stronger, the roads have gotten a little bit more congested, because when you go from 10% unemployment to 5% unemployment, that incremental car on the road of somebody driving to work makes the traffic problem worse. So I think between people feeling a little bit better about the economy, the roads being a little bit more congested, and most importantly, because we asked a simulated ballot question, is why the numbers went up.
Okay. One other question. Do you have any timetable set that you're trying to shoot for within a year, 2 years, or what kind of timetable are you looking at?
You want to?
Yeah, we are looking at a run-up to the November 2016 ballot. So the decisions about whether we would have, to work out the language and decide whether the board wants to go ahead with that would happen in the spring of 2016.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
All right.
I just wanted to follow up on Bonnie's question about having multiple requests on the ballot. In this most recent election in Lincoln, the school district had a bond measure that they had placed 4 years ago, which was resoundingly defeated. This time they placed it on the ballot, did zero outreach, and it passed significantly. So sometimes less is more.
Absolutely.
A little bit of risk there, but it worked. I know the school district was just flabbergasted that it passed. So I think that may follow with your assumption that the mindset has changed, and particularly with people traveling on Highway 65, seeing themselves stuck in congestion all times of the day, I think has changed people's perception of there needs to be a fix.
Completely agree.
Well, I don't see any more questions from board members. Thank you for your in-depth status report. I just wonder if there's anyone in the audience wishes to address us on this issue. Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Flint.
Thank you for your continued assistance.
All righty. And I'll just say that I was at the BIA meeting. It was very positive. And also Council Member Butler from Rockland was there, and Council Member Rohan was there as well. And and then Council Member.
And Chair Russlin was also there.
Yeah, right. So it was very positive. And then Celia and I attended the Auburn Host Lions Club and gave a presentation, and that went very well. And tomorrow we're having breakfast at the Nether Lions Club and lunch at a Kiwanis Club. So, all right. So we're reaching out. You got anything going on up there you need me to come up for?
Not with food, so you would.
Not with booze.
Food.
Oh, food.
Don't even bring up that other.
All righty. Very good. Thank you. We will now move to the Executive Director's report.
Yes, the item I wanted to bring to the board's attention is the work that we're doing with the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority on trying to obtain cap and trade funds for the third track project. The board's aware that cap and trade has come into being charged on motor vehicle fuels as of the first of the year. And so there are a number of programs that have been put forward by the state under that. I will say that most of them we are not terribly competitive for. The one that we think we have the best shot at is the portion to go towards inner-city rail, and that's why the third track project is high-profile enough and close enough to construction that it could attract some significant dollars. There's only $125 million available in the first year for cap and trade, and as you know, the third track project is about a $200 million project, so it's going to be pretty competitive. But what we have in our corner is that we can go to construction rather quickly, and not a lot of major transportation projects are shelf ready. And we also have the ability to do some phasing on this, so we wouldn't ask for the whole $200 million, but we would phase that and then get our foot in the door. We do have some matching funds from Proposition 1A, which is the high-speed rail bond, interestingly enough. There is a certain portion of that that is for feeder train service, and Capital Corridors considered that, and as well as the $3 million we put into the project through the State Transportation Improvement Program back in 2002 that we've been pushing forward as the project has been going along. So we think that we can put together a strategy that could attract some dollars. One of the challenges is, of course, that we need Union Pacific to be on board in terms of the design of this project, and we're working closely with them. There is a chance that we may need to go back to the powers that be in Omaha to get their approval on this. But we believe that Union Pacific has interest in that. That area is also a bottleneck for their freight operations. So adding a third track, while it adds more passenger service, it does allow freight to travel on those tracks when the passenger trains are not on them. So it really could be a win-win, and we're hoping that moves forward. So we're working on that strategy, and we'll keep the board informed as that moves forward.
Okay.
That concludes my report.
All righty. Any questions or direction? All righty. We will, there's informational items for your review if you wish to look at them. And that concludes our meeting.
There's
At this
board
time, is
direction to staff.
there- What?
Board direction to
Oh,
staff.
well, I thought, any direction, I thought I kind of said that. Any board direction to staff? Celia, I just want you to keep up the good work. Okay. How's it? All right. All right, informational items, that concludes our meeting. We will, our next regularly scheduled PCTPA board meeting is February 25th.
And actually, if I might, I need to add a note about our February 25th meeting.
Yes.
That will be scheduled not here in the Board of Supervisors chambers, but across the street over at the PCTPA offices, because in conjunction with our board meeting, we'll be having a public officials workshop with SACOG on the update to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan.
Okay.
That we're facilitating with them, and that being that all the electeds on the city councils and board of supervisors will be invited to that, we needed a bigger room. So you'll be seeing that in your next agenda packet.
Okay, very good. Anything else? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.